Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode session. I don't know what to call these different segments of our LinkedIn Live topics. Number 4. We're on number 4. Welcome to it. For all of those who are joining us live, happy Thursday. Hope that the week is going well. For everybody who's joining us on the recording afterwards, hello. Thank you for taking a little time out of your schedule to watch the video here. This week, we've been talking about non-business books or non-sales books that can really help sales professionals, entrepreneurs, and business owners. We're talking about the 5 non-sales authors that you need to learn from and how to act on some of the best ideas that are out there. So yesterday, for example, we got a chance to dive into Dan Pink. Everything, of course, is still sitting on my desk in this wonderful chaos that we have. And I'm sorry, just noticing that I've got some curl going on in my hair. That's what happens when it's humid and you haven't had a haircut for way too long. But anyways, I'm really excited for today's topic. Thank you again for everybody who's joining us. Hey, thanks for the reactions. Good to see you. Hey, Robert, you made one live. Appreciate being here. Heather, thanks for joining us. If you're here live, make sure use the comment section. Use if you have questions, if you have suggestions, other books that you think are valuable for people to take a look at. Feel free to throw those up into that comment section. Feel free to hit those reaction buttons. Honestly, it just makes me feel like I'm not home alone, locked in my home office, which is also my wife's home office now, and the nursery, just yelling into the void, right? So a little validation is always good. I am excited about today's author, one of my favorites. But as I kind of said in my LinkedIn post about today's session, this is not for the faint of heart. And what I mean by that is this is an author who definitely has challenged me over, I guess, probably the last, his first book that I read came out in, 2004. So really kind of the last 15 years has challenged me a lot. He's an author that is kind of definitely business oriented, but also life oriented, and it's philosophy, and it really requires a lot of the reader. And I think that's good. Something I said about Malcolm Gladwell's work when we covered him was that you should really engage with the books you read. I think that if you really want to get the most out of them, it's not just, oh, here's a good idea, I can use it. The best ones are the ones that you think about, you actually are in conversation with. You go, I don't think that's right. And why do I not think that's right? And makes you think critically. And this guy definitely has done that. So we're talking about Nassim Nicholas Taleb, or I think Nassim Taleb. Sorry, I've got 3 of his books here. As you can see, they tend to be kind of thick. We're going to be talking about Fooled by Randomness, The Black Swan, which I think is incredibly relevant right now as we are living through a black swan. One of his latest, Anti-Fragile. He's got a few others. Procruste's Bed, I think it's called. And he has a newer one that I have not read yet either, Skin in the Game. So I'll have a chance to check those out. And to say that I practice what I preach, I'm not even all the way through Anti-Fragile. This came out a couple of years ago, and I kind of just go through it a couple of chapters at a time. That's kind of all I can bite off, and I got to chew it for a while. But that being said, I think if you're willing to kind of engage with what he's saying as we dive into these, and really any good author, if you're willing to engage with what he's saying, there are some really interesting ideas that can really shape the context of how you approach your day-to-day business. I will. I'll make sure to share that, Katie. Sorry, I have to look past my camera to see the comments. That's why I kind of have to go like this sometimes. So anyways, why I'm kind of prepping you for this is Taleb is definitely an author where there's not going to be a lot of direct, oh, here's the 3 simple things to do to have a better business, to sell more, to, have a better professional career. For example, Dan Pink, who we talked about yesterday, who's a fantastic author, is a little more prescriptive. Hey, do this, this, and this. Talib is really like, hey, let's pull back the curtain and see how life really works. And then based on that, let's examine some of the preconceptions that we're using to organize, to focus our attention and see if those are really the right ones. Now, I'm not nearly as combative as Nassim is. He will definitely, he pulls no punches. And so if you want to see what I mean, read the books or see some of his videos. Like, he has no problem going like, you're an idiot, and here's why. Or something that I think he would say even more than you're an idiot is, you're a fool. So let's talk about Fooled by Randomness. Read this about 15 years ago. Even though I think Anti-Fragile is the best just for like really diving deep, Black Swan is kind of his most well-known and is, again, very relevant right now. I think Fooled by Randomness was and is a great place to start, because what he's really looking at is kind of how we as humans engage with randomness, with chance, with luck. And he looks at the ways, both practically and philosophically, how we as humans engage with those topics. Meaning, how do we engage with the fact that we do have randomness in our life? How do we engage with chance? And one of the biggest things I liked about this book is he was looking at a lot of, for example, behavioral economics and a lot of the heuristics that scientists are really starting to understand we use to manage the world and to go through it. And he kind of calls into question some beliefs that we have that we want to think about. So I'm in the professional development world. I get it. I'm a coach. I'm a speaker. I give suggestions to people on how to run their business or even their life. But I always try to take everything I say with a grain of salt, knowing like, hey, I don't have all the answers. But one of the things that I do think is that there's this feeling, or rather, let's call it an environment, where we as humans always look to other people for the answers. And what Fooled by Randomness really does is it calls into question how the people who are successful become successful, and whether or not it's really worth following their guidance. So to kind of distill it down, it's, we watch the video or we read the blog. Here's the 7 steps to be a successful entrepreneur. Here's the 7 steps to be a successful salesperson. Here's the 7 steps to be a successful investor and become rich and successful. And what he's really saying is that there's some things required to get to success that aren't always under our control. And so it's dangerous just to go, well, all I have to do to be a successful investor is to be like Warren Buffett, right? And that's, kind of an easy example. Or if I wanted to be a better professional speaker and guru or something, which I don't want to be a guru, but all I have to do is do what Tony Robbins did. And so what he's really pointing out is that luck and randomness play a bigger role. And this is huge in the sales world, because there's this very strong current through sales and entrepreneurship, again, that very individualistic in the United States for sure, that says like success is a choice, right? I think there's a book called Success is a Choice. As long as you work hard, as long as you put forth the effort, that's all that matters. And anybody who is successful, like, just do what they did and work hard and you'll be successful. And he's pointing out that's absolutely not true. So this is kind of where I got a lot of my kind of iconoclastic approach to some professional development and success literature. Salespeople, it's not just as long as I just work hard, I will be successful. There are variables. There are things that we can't take into consideration. For example, what happens if you start your new business in a black swan, right? Which we'll talk about in a moment. And so it's really looking at this idea of chance versus skill. And mind you, he's not saying that work isn't important. He's just saying there's a lot of variables, and we often tend to push those aside when we really look at how we're going to structure the work we do. So really fascinating. For example, survivorship bias is a great thing to look at. Just using investing as an example, we look at people who are really successful investors. And we go, well, they must be really smart and know it all, and I got to listen to what they say. But the survivorship bias basically means that we just look at the successful people, and we just go, well, whatever it took to be successful, that works. But we don't look at all the people who did what those successful people did and didn't succeed, right? And so even just taking that into account allows you to approach life and business a little differently. And I think it really challenges us to have a more full approach to the work that we're doing, and where we put our definition of success. This was one of the first books that really helped me understand why having an external locus of control, an external definer of success, can be really dangerous. And when you start to go like, I'm going to define success for myself, it's actually really, really powerful. So definitely, it's a fun read. I said, even though he's definitely an intense author, there's a ton of ideas packed in there. It's actually very readable and very interesting. I would love someday to just have a beer with Nassim, and I'm sure we get into a pretty fun argument. In fact, I should say, I don't know if he was able to jump on today. I did let my friend Ian know that I was covering Taleb. Taleb has been a foundation of many of me and Ian and I's conversations / arguments over the years, usually over a beverage or two. But I mean, it's just such great practical philosophy. So anyways, looking at Black Swan, what is a black swan? I mean, if you look at the title, the impact of the highly improbable. I wonder if we're being impacted by a highly improbable event. Maybe. So yeah, we're in a black swan. And so let me give the definition of a black swan from him. And I think that this is super important for, again, how we're parsing our experience right now as we live through this very strange time. So his definition: first, a black swan is an outlier as it lies outside the realm of regular expectations because nothing in the past can convincingly point to its possibility. Second, it carries an extreme impact. Third, in spite of its outlier status, human nature makes us concoct explanations for its occurrence after the fact, making it explainable and predictable. To summarize, it has rarity, extreme impact, and retrospective, though not prospective, predictability. So that's kind of what a black swan event is. What's really interesting is that in some ways, I don't think we're completely in a black swan event, because even though it was unpredictable when something like this would happen, it was not really a surprise that it would eventually happen. I mean, if there's a Netflix documentary about pandemics that comes out months before a pandemic, this isn't either it's an Illuminati conspiracy, which, by the way, it is not, or just, I mean, everybody was warning about this. We know that this has been on people's minds. There's the Bill Gates video from a couple of years ago saying, hey, this kind of illness would be a big problem. This kind of virus could be very devastating. But we still didn't know when it was going to happen. And so because of that, it's easy for us to not look at it at all. And what's really interesting, beyond just defining a black swan event, he really looks at kind of how humans are really bad at understanding nonlinear systems. And I think that is critical if you're in sales, if you're in entrepreneurship, if you're a business owner, because most human beings, again, we're wired just as physiological beings to understand direct relationships. If I push a rock, it goes so far. If I push that rock twice as hard, it's going to go twice as far or twice as fast. A lot of things in life are not like that. And they're very indirect, right? We're seeing this with exponential growth of a virus, but just even in a lot of our business systems, they're not linear, right? And because of that, we often make mistakes. So it was really interesting for me, and he was talking about, for example, he calls him mediocristan, I think, and extremistan. And so he looks like linear, or kind of what the variability that we can understand as things where it's mostly going to be mediocre, meaning in the middle. So if you think about the distribution curve of height, it's a bell curve, right? Most people are kind of around the average, and then there's outliers that are taller and shorter, right? And that's kind of what we get as humans. But one of the things that I think is really interesting is this idea of extremistan. One thing you point out is authors, right? You have most authors don't sell a lot of books. In fact, most books sell under 1,000, less than 250 a year. But then you look at J.K. Rowling or any big author, Nassim Taleb or Dan Pink, any of the people we're talking about this week, and it goes, it's weighted towards that. And so really anything where there's kind of an easy access to the space, like podcasting, being a YouTube creator, writing books, sales and entrepreneurship in many ways it follows this too. There's going to be just a couple people who there's advantages to being the biggest one, and it is an unequal world. And so what's interesting to me though is just to think about how that impacts how I run my business, and again how you run your business. I think what it does is it takes out some of the judgment about how you're doing, whether you're being successful or unsuccessful, or what success really is. This is something that I often say when people come to me and say, hey, I want to write a book. One of the first things I say is, great, what are your goals? Because by the way, if you're like, hey, I'm going to sell a lot of books, it's probably not going to happen, right? Statistically, very, very slim. Like even if it's a great book that has a bunch of marketing behind it, it might not do that well. So I think it really helps us reconfigure our expectations. And actually the best tip that I got from this is it's almost a little throwaway chapter, but he pointed out that if a train comes repeatedly, you can't miss it. So missing the train is only painful if you run after it. If you don't run after the train, you'll get the next one, right? Which being in Chicago and trying to catch the L quite often is something that I think about a lot. So that is the black swan. Anti-fragile. So I start with the first two. I then would go to anti-fragile. What's really interesting about this is he talks about anti-fragile systems. And his point in the book is that an anti-fragile system is actually not just not fragile. Like we actually think of something that's not fragile as tough, like a stone is not fragile. What his argument is that there's actually systems that get better, that improve and get stronger under stress, right? So you have what he calls fragile, right? Fragile systems, I think that makes sense. Robust, meaning they can take stress, they can take problems. And then there's anti-fragile systems, which when there's stress, when things are tough, they actually get better. So an example he uses is, for example, kind of evolution or physical biology. Like as the human body gets exposed to different stressors, whether that's kind of on a long term, kind of evolutionarily, or just we get exposed to illness. Coronavirus is showing what happens when we don't have that. Our systems get stronger, right? We're exposed to chickenpox when we're younger. We now develop that immunity when we're adults. So what he points out, and I think this is really interesting, is a couple things. One is most of our systems, the more complex a system gets, the more fragile it gets. And I think we're seeing, I don't know the right answers to this. I'm sure he's maybe giving some interviews on YouTube. I should go find out. Are we seeing in the current moment that, our political and social and economic structures, are they anti-fragile or fragile? Maybe they're robust. Because if they are anti-fragile, this stress will actually make them better. And he points out that it's actually important to have some fragility in the system, in the components, to actually make it stronger. He points out, and this is, I'm not going to explain it well in 30 seconds, but it's still important to note. He points out, some businesses, it's in a large scale economy, you have to let some businesses dissolve or go bankrupt, right? To make the overall economy stronger. And so not that he's saying, hey, all the small businesses should go away, or, hey, we shouldn't provide support. But, for example, and he's not even talking about small businesses, he's talking about big businesses. Like, does preventing the evolution of, for example, the banking system or the healthcare system? Does that actually make it more fragile down the line because we're kind of propping it up? And that's where you start to get into really interesting arguments and good arguments. And argument not meaning like the crap you see on social media or television, but arguments like trying to work from different points of view to get a better idea of how to move forward. So this is the work, and Talib's definitely the author who, trying to talk about him in 20 minutes. I mean, we just touched on the depth. I mean, you could really look at any of these chapters and just pull a bunch out of it. But again, I think for us, there's a couple things to take into account. One is right now, just your mind view, your perspective on what's happening now, what's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 months, the rest of this year, is cut yourself a little slack and understand that the context we're in, the environment we're in, is a challenging one. It is tough. There's a lot of variables that you don't control, right? It's kind of like if you were humming along in your life, in your business, your family, your relationships, you went into the doctor and you have cancer. All the things change. You need to approach life a little differently. You need to prioritize differently. We're kind of like in that same place, but again, on a more macro level. So that's the first step, is understand that there are variables right now that you can't control. I'm a professional speaker. I don't know when, there's going to be a lot of in-person events. It could be, I'd be surprised if it's July and August, maybe September. They're already canceling stuff in September. I can't control that. I can only control the stuff that is within, my purview. The second thing is to understand the power of indirect relationships. So even if you're like, hey, I feel that right now I'm putting a lot of effort, I'm not getting things back because like my customers, their budgets are frozen or they don't know what's going on. That's okay. Understand that if you're still putting effort in, you're putting attention on it, you'll get stuff back. I mean, why am I doing these LinkedIn Lives? It's not because I think all of you are going to call me up afterwards and be like, hey, can we give you a bunch of money to do work for us? That would be great, but I'm not expecting that. But I do feel that it's valuable, both again, kind of karmically to put good material and help out there, but also again, in the long term, I know that there's an indirect relationship. And so even though I'm putting stuff out now, I might not see the benefit now, I might see it in the future. And so that's why I'm doing it. That's something I think that you can pull from that. And then, kind of the third thing is kind of on a more of a context scale as well. Be very careful of the advice you're taking from me, from everybody right now. And just go like, hey, you're successful, but what are the things that have helped you become successful? And is there some survivorship bias in there? Is there some variables that I don't know about? And, for example, I've seen there's a lot of people asking billionaires for advice on how to get through this. And I'm like, just because you're a billionaire, I mean, you're probably a good business person, probably, but there might be a lot of stuff that we don't know about. It's amazing how many really successful business people, for example, had really, they came with a ton of wealth. That helps, right? And so just be really aware of that, because I think that it's often easy to miss that. And we'll often take bad advice and things that aren't as relevant. So that's Nassim Nicholas Taleb, Anti-Fragile, Black Swan, Fooled by Randomness. Thank you for joining me today. And we have one more session. Looking forward to that. That'll be, if you want to join us live, Friday, 11:30 Central Time, or you'll of course be able to catch the recording. If there's anything I can do to help you, please let me know. I work with sales organizations, entrepreneurs, small business owners, really working around sales, networking, relationship building, LinkedIn, and social media. So if you're looking for help with any of those on an individual basis or on an organizational basis, feel free to go ahead and check out our website. You can even check out our blog. A ton more. By the way, I do know that I have a review of the Black Swan on the blog, so that might be a little more in depth for you if you found this interesting. Thanks for stopping by. Don't go out if you don't have to. All right. If you do, say thank you to the people who are making the economy run. I thought about this, I was talking about yesterday, the garbage men and women, the post office, cashier at the grocery store, the person stocking the shelves, and of course our healthcare workers. Say thank you to them. And in the meantime, be patient, be kind, take care of one another.